The sky over what had once been the Atlantic Ocean was burning. Not metaphorically, not poetically, actually burning. The atmosphere had fractured into layers of ionized fire, glowing like a wounded star as alien energy lanced downward in methodical, uncaring columns. The oceans boiled, continents cracked. Satellites, once humanity's proud ring of eyes and voices, fell like dying insects, their final transmissions dissolving into static screams. Earth was ending. Dr. Elias Cade watched it happen from beneath the ruins of Geneva. He was not a soldier, not a hero, not even, by the standards of the old world, especially important. He was an archivist, the last one. The bunker shuddered as another orbital strike carved a continent-sized scar across what used to be North America. The seismic readouts screamed red, then went dark. Elias didn't flinch. He had already watched the world die once, slowly, over the last 50 years. This was just the punctuation mark. Around him, the archive hummed. Thousands of crystal-dense memory spires glowed softly, each containing compressed records of human civilization, art, science, languages, wars, mistakes, triumphs, everything humanity had been. Every lie we told ourselves, every hope we ever had, and now, everything we were about to lose. The aliens, the Thren, had not come to conquer. They came to erase. No negotiations, no occupation, no mercy. They stripped worlds the way a fire strips oxygen. Elias's console chimed. Project Janus, final window open. Temporal displacement, unstable. Success probability, 0.0037%. He laughed. A raw, broken sound. Better odds than we got last time, he muttered. The Thren had arrived without warning in 2379. By 2421, Earth was gone. Not fallen. Gone. They weren't invincible. Humanity had learned that much too late. Thren ships bled when struck by relativistic mass drivers. Their command structures fractured under asymmetric warfare. They feared something. Elias never learned what. But they adapted faster than humanity could. The real failure hadn't been technology. It had been time. Humanity didn't unite until the oceans were already boiling. Didn't weaponize space until Earth's orbit was a graveyard. Didn't believe extinction was real until extinction was unavoidable. So Elias had done the unthinkable. He stole everything. The archive was never meant to leave Earth. But over decades, piece by piece, he had rewritten its access protocols, condensed centuries of human history into transportable quantum matrices, and, most dangerously, integrated captured Thren intelligence. Physiology, psychology, strategic blind spots. Their weaknesses. A tremor knocked him to his knees. Concrete dust rained from the ceiling. The bunker's AI spoke, calm to the end. Structural failure in 90 seconds. Plenty of time, Elias said, lying through his teeth. He dragged himself toward the device at the center of the chamber. Project Janus looked nothing like a time machine from old movies. No spinning rings. No glowing portals. Just a coffin-shaped frame of black matter lattice, humming with stolen physics humanity had never been meant to understand. Time travel wasn't safe. It wasn't stable. It wasn't even technically possible, unless you were desperate enough to ignore causality's screaming objections. Elias keyed in the destination. Temporal target, Earth, 1961C. The year mattered. Early enough to change everything. Late enough to be believed. The first orbital flights. The Cold War. The space race. The moment humanity first seriously looked up and wondered if it was alone. Humanity, Elias whispered, as the bunker began to collapse around him. I'm sorry it took us this long to learn. The AI hesitated. Final query, preservation priority? Elias smiled sadly. All of it, he said. The good, the bad, the shameful. If we're going to survive, we don't get to lie to ourselves anymore. The sky above Geneva split open. White light poured into the bunker. The Thren had found him. Energy tore through the archive. Spires shattered. Data screamed as quantum states collapsed. Elias stepped into the frame. The last human on Earth. The last witness. The last hope. Run, he told the machine. Reality folded. He woke up choking on air that didn't burn. That alone told him it had worked. The smell hit next. Oil, metal, cigarette smoke, and something almost painfully clean compared to the poisoned future he'd left behind. He gasped and rolled onto concrete. Overhead, Fluorescent lights buzzed. Men shouted. Someone pointed a gun at him. "Don't move," a voice barked. "Hands where I can see them." Elias raised his hands slowly, heart hammering. The calendar on the wall behind them read, April 12, 1961, the day Yuri Gagarin went to space. Elias laughed, hysterical and relieved. "Oh," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Oh, thank God, we still have time." The first thing Elias learned about the past was that people still believed the world made sense. That belief was harder to fight than any alien fleet. They kept him in a windowless room beneath what he would later learn was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The walls were concrete. The lights hummed. The air smelled like stale coffee and nervous sweat. 3 men sat across from him. One wore an Air Force uniform. One wore a suit. One wore the kind of expression that said CIA without ever needing to say it. They had taken his clothes, future fabric that had nearly caused a panic attack in materials science, and replaced them with fatigues that felt like sandpaper and history. "Let's try this again," the man in the suit said calmly. "Name?" "Dr. Elias Cade." "Country of origin?" "United Earth," Elias replied automatically. The Air Force colonel snorted. "Cute." Elias leaned forward, chains rattling softly. "Colonel, if I wanted cute, I'd have said Mars." That earned him a look. The CIA man, Anderson, according to the nameplate he never quite turned away, folded his hands. "You appeared," Anderson said, "in a secured NASA facility on the same day the Soviets put a man in orbit. You claim to be from 400 years in the future. You have technology we can't identify and knowledge you shouldn't have." Elias nodded. "You're missing the most important part." "And what's that?" "I'm late." Silence. Elias took a breath. He'd rehearsed this. For decades. "In my timeline," he said, "Yuri Gagarin dies on re-entry." The colonel stiffened. "He didn't. He will survive," Elias corrected, "now. Because this is already a different timeline." "Congratulations. You've just confirmed me." They stared at him. Elias continued before they could interrupt. "In the original timeline, the heat shield flaw on Vostok 1 causes partial failure. Gagarin survives the ejection seat, but the capsule burns more than expected. Soviet engineers quietly redesign. History never knows." Anderson's pen stopped moving. "You know things," Anderson said slowly, "that haven't happened yet." "Yes," Elias said, "and things that won't, if you listen to me." They tested him for 6 days. Predictions. Technical questions. Cold War secrets he should not have known. He told them about a U-2 spy plane incident before it happened. A failed missile test 2 weeks in the future. A specific phrase Khrushchev would use in a private meeting. Every time, reality bent to his words. On day 7, they brought him to a hangar. Inside was his machine. Project Janus looked like a coffin to them. To Elias, it looked like a miracle that hadn't collapsed into paradox yet. "This," Elias said, touching the black lattice frame reverently, "is proof that humanity will one day break time itself." The colonel swallowed. "And why would you bring this to us?" Elias turned to face them. "Because in 400 years," he said quietly, "Earth is gone. Not conquered. Not occupied. Erased." He activated a projection. The hangar filled with light. Alien ships blotted out stars. Cities burned. Oceans boiled. Satellites fell. Men swore. One technician vomited. "This is the Thren," Elias said. "They don't negotiate. They don't enslave. They don't hate you. They don't even care." Anderson's voice was tight. "Why us? Why America?" Elias didn't hesitate. "Because you already believe the future is something you can build," he said. "And because you're already racing towards space like your life depends on it." He let the words settle. "It does." Officially, nothing changed. Unofficially, everything did. NASA received funding increases buried under Cold War panic. Projects that were supposed to take decades were suddenly prioritized. Engineers found solutions that felt like inspiration but were actually nudges, carefully disguised insights Elias fed them through intermediaries. Never too much. Never enough to expose him. Humanity still had to earn it. The space race didn't just become about beating the Soviets. It became about learning how to survive space. Radiation shielding, closed-loop life support, orbital manufacturing, early AI control systems, all of it framed as defense applications. Meanwhile, Elias worked with a black-budget task force that didn't officially exist. They called it Project Aegis. Its real mission wasn't weapons. It was unity. How do we stop ourselves from killing each other long enough to notice the sky? One general asked bitterly. Elias answered honestly. You don't, he said. You redirect it. History still needed pressure, but not annihilation. Some wars never ignited. Others burned briefly, then sputtered out. Arms shipments delayed, intelligence mistakes, leaders quietly discredited before they could escalate. Elias hated these moments most. Changing history wasn't clean, but extinction was worse. By the late 1960s, something subtle had shifted. Humans were still divided, still paranoid, but space no longer felt like a stunt. It felt like a destination. The moon landing happened on schedule. What didn't make the history books was what followed. Permanent orbital infrastructure. Secret shipyards hidden in plain sight. Research stations that were officially weather platforms. And deep beneath it all, data vaults quietly growing. A second archive. One night, Elias stood alone on a catwalk overlooking a prototype station module. Stars glittered through reinforced glass. Beautiful. Fragile. In his timeline, this place would have been debris. You look tired, Anderson said, joining him. I am, Elias admitted. Every time I fix something, I remember how it ended the first time. And if we fail anyway? Elias stared at the stars. Then at least this time, he said softly, humanity will go down fighting together. Anderson hesitated. You ever worry you're playing God? Elias smiled sadly. No, he said. God had eternity. I've got a deadline. Far above them, humanity took its first real steps toward the stars. And somewhere out in the dark, something ancient shifted. History did not shatter all at once. It forked, and most people never noticed. By 1972, humanity had placed 6 flags on the moon. Officially, funding slowed. Public interest waned. History books would later call it the end of an era. Unofficially, the era had just begun. Elias watched it unfold from rooms that didn't exist on any map. Conference chambers buried under mountains, orbital stations disguised as weather platforms, and eventually, places that weren't quite in space or on Earth. Project Aegis had grown teeth. Not fangs. Teeth. Enough to bite when needed. It came in 1977, 2 years before Voyager launched. A spike in deep space background noise that didn't match pulsars, quasars, or any natural phenomenon humanity knew. To the scientists, it was an anomaly. To Elias, it was a chill down his spine. They're early, he said quietly. Anderson, older now, slower but sharper, frowned. Early how? In my timeline, Elias said. The Thren don't start active extragalactic surveys until the late 21st century. So this is good news, right? A general asked. We're ahead of schedule. Elias shook his head. No, he said. It means the universe noticed us sooner. Silence followed. Humanity had lit a brighter fire this time, and something in the dark had seen it. By the 1980s, Elias understood something critical. He couldn't just stop bad things. Trying to prevent every tragedy made the timeline brittle, unstable. Pushed too hard, and history snapped back in unpredictable ways. So he learned to redirect instead. Some conflicts burned, but shorter. Some leaders fell, but earlier. Some technologies advanced faster, but only just. The Cold War never went hot. It came close, closer than history would ever know. During one particularly tense week in 1983, Elias sat in a bunker watching missile telemetry that, in the original timeline, had nearly ended everything. A Soviet officer misread data. This time, that officer had been reassigned 5 years earlier due to a different mistake Elias had quietly engineered. The missiles never launched. Humanity breathed on. Not all interventions were clean. Some people who became heroes in the original timeline never had the chance. Others who would have caused untold harm vanished from relevance before they could matter. Elias carried those names like ghosts. You're changing people's lives without their consent, a younger analyst accused him once. Elias didn't argue. You're right, he said. I am. He looked tired. Old. Far older than his body suggested. But I've seen what happens when we don't, he added softly. That ended the debate. By the 1990s, humanity had 2 histories. The public one, personal computers, the internet, globalization, the usual chaos. The other one, early AI overseers, autonomous orbital factories, prototype fusion drives hidden behind research reactors. And one quiet, terrifying truth. Humanity was being watched. Not closely. Not yet. But enough. Deep space sensors, descendants of radio telescopes, picked up distortions that matched Thren propulsion signatures. Decades early. They're not coming, Anderson said during one late-night briefing. Not yet. Elias nodded. They're listening. Elias had always known there were fixed points. Moments history seemed to want to happen, no matter how much he adjusted, redirected, softened. September 11th, 2001 pressed against the timeline like a bruise. He felt it years in advance. Sleep became difficult. Nightmares crept in, burning towers, screaming, ash falling like snow. They're going to try, he told the Aegis Council in 1999. Something big. Something symbolic. They listened. This time, humanity was ready. 4 planes took off that morning. None of them reached their targets. 2 were grounded due to cascading maintenance issues. 1 was intercepted after its transponder failure raised alarms. The 4th never left the runway. Its plot unraveled after an intelligence asset panicked and talked. No towers fell. No were followed. The world held its breath and then exhaled. The public never knew how close it had come. But something changed. Fear didn't harden into rage. And without that rage, entire branches of history simply withered. Elias wept that night. Not because it was over, but because it had almost happened anyway. Some paths were easier to close than others. One particular figure, loud, volatile, driven by grievance and spectacle, had loomed large in Elias's original timeline. Not as a cause of extinction, but as a symptom of a fractured species. In the early 2000s, financial crimes that would once have been buried were not. Investigations that would have stalled did not. The man never rose. He never became a symbol. History barely remembered his name. The timeline relaxed. By the year 2000, Elias felt it clearly. The future was no longer just reacting. It was resisting. Probability curves tightened. Coincidences stacked. Events tried to reassert themselves in new forms. The universe did not like being cheated. And somewhere beyond human detection, the Thren began to move with purpose. Elias stood before the growing archive, humanity's second memory. They're still coming, he said. But this time, Anderson replied, we'll be waiting. Elias nodded. And for the first time since Earth burned, he allowed himself a fragile, dangerous hope. Humanity did not unite in a speech. There was no single flag raised, no dramatic declaration that now they were one people. Unity came the way stone becomes a wall, slowly, deliberately, one block at a time. And always, quietly. Without September 11th, the early 21st century unfolded differently. Not peacefully, never peacefully, but less fractured. Fear did not metastasize into endless war. Surveillance powers were debated instead of rubber-stamped. Entire regions that had once become grinding battlefields instead simmered, cooled, and, eventually, stabilized. The world still argued, but it didn't bleed out. Elias watched the numbers with grim satisfaction. Global military deaths declined decade over decade. Scientific collaboration rose. Climate mitigation, once stalled by political paralysis, actually began early. You're telling me this helps us fight aliens? One senator asked skeptically. Elias met their eyes. I'm telling you, he said. A planet busy killing itself never notices extinction until it's too late. That argument always worked. By 2035, Project Aegis was no longer American in anything but paperwork. Its true form was something new. Shared orbital infrastructure, joint research stations, intelligence pipelines that crossed borders effortlessly. Old rivalries still existed, but now they had rules. And above them all, in stations that officially did not exist, humanity built its real future. Not ships. Not yet. Doctrine. How do you fight something that doesn't want your territory? One strategist asked. Elias answered instantly. You don't defend land, he said. You defend time. They didn't understand at first. They would. It came in 2048. A probe launched toward the outer heliosphere stopped responding. Not malfunctioned. Not destroyed. Rewritten. The data it sent back before going silent was wrong in ways that defied error. Constants subtly altered. Background radiation patterns smoothed, as if something had passed through and edited reality behind it. Elias stared at the readout, face pale. They're mapping us, he whispered. A scientist frowned. Mapping what? Our future, Elias said. That was the day humanity stopped pretending this was hypothetical. Humanity's first real interstellar weapons were not lasers or missiles. They were logistics, self-repairing fleets, distributed command, AI that could lose entire sectors and still function, manufacturing systems that could turn asteroids into warships without waiting for permission. Elias insisted on it. In my timeline, he told them, we built perfect ships that died when their admirals did. This time, ships would think, not independently, collectively. A human strength, scaled to the stars. The truth goes public, 2072. They couldn't hide it forever. The announcement was calm, measured, unavoidable. We are not alone. We have evidence. They are not friendly. There was panic. There were riots. There were cult suicides and doomsday prophets screaming that the end had come. But something unexpected happened too. People listened. Because the world hadn't spent the last century tearing itself apart. Because the institutions announcing this weren't liars, at least not anymore. And because humanity had already taken its first steps into space together. Elias watched the broadcast from orbit. They're taking it better than I thought, Anderson said beside him, old now, frail but sharp as ever. They always could, Elias replied. They just needed time. The Thren made contact in 2091. Not with words. With absence. Entire deep space regions went dark. Stars occluded not by mass, but by nullification. Sensors failed. Probes vanished without energy signatures. A message, if you knew how to read it. We are here. Humanity didn't flinch. They activated Aegis Protocol Black. For the first time, Earth went dark on purpose. No emissions. No broadcasts. No signatures that mattered. And for the first time in either timeline, the Thren hesitated. In 2140, Elias did something he had avoided for nearly 2 centuries. He told the truth. Not the public truth. The deep truth. He stood before the unified assembly, humanity's quiet, hard-earned governing body, and told them everything. Earth destroyed. Time travel. The original defeat. Some cried. Some raged. Some refused to believe him. But no one laughed. Why tell us now? A delegate asked. Elias looked tired. Because they're coming, he said. And this time, I don't know if changing the past is enough. Silence stretched. Then someone asked the question that mattered. What do we do? Elias smiled. The first real smile in centuries. We stop running, he said. And we show them why exterminating humans was a mistake. In 2197, Thren war forms entered the Oort cloud. They expected prey. They found sentries. Autonomous defense swarms woke from centuries of dormancy. Relativistic kill vehicles, simple, brutal, effective, struck from angles no biological mind would choose. The Thren adapted. Of course they did. But so did humanity. Because adaptation was no longer reactive. It was built in. Elias stood on the bridge of Earth's primary command station, watching tactical displays bloom like constellations. This is where we died last time, someone whispered. Elias shook his head. No, he said softly. This is where we lived. The Thren had destroyed Earth once. They remembered it as a minor inconvenience. A noisy species. Brief resistance. Interesting physics. Ultimately irrelevant. That memory would cost them everything. The first true battle didn't happen near Earth. That was humanity's first surprise. The Thren fleet crossed into the inner system expecting a panicked, centralized defense clustered around the homeworld, just like before. Instead, they found nothing. No fleets. No broadcasts. No visible resistance. Then something struck them from behind. Relativistic mass, barely larger than a car, slammed into a Thren command vessel at 99% of light speed. The ship didn't explode. It ceased. Reality folded inward, and the space it had occupied simply wasn't there anymore. The Thren reacted instantly, reconfiguring formation, adapting shields, rewriting their tactical algorithms. And that's when the second strike hit. From a direction that made no strategic sense. Then a third. Then 1,000 more. Humanity didn't fight in lines. They fought like a swarm of angry engineers. Where is their command structure? A Thren synaptic node queried. There was no answer. Because there wasn't one. Human fleets were not fleets in the traditional sense. They were ecosystems, networks of semi-autonomous units that could lose 90% of their mass and still function. Kill one ship? The others learned. Jam communications? They'd already anticipated it. Rewrite physics locally? Human weapons were deliberately inelegant. Dumb mass. Raw energy. Things that didn't care if space-time was misbehaving. Elias watched the battle unfold from Earth's command station, his hands steady despite the storm of data. "They're confused," a tactical AI observed. Elias nodded. "They always are." The Thren were ancient, millions of years old. Their technology refined to near perfection. Their wars efficient, clean, optimized. Humanity was not optimized. Humanity was creative under pressure. When a Thren null field erased an entire defense cluster, humanity responded by detonating a star's worth of stored fusion fuel outside the field, flooding it with entropy until it collapsed under its own mathematical arrogance. When Thren vessels began phasing partially out of causality, human ships began firing weapons where the enemy would have been if they'd stayed sane. It worked, not because it was clever, because humans had been improvising their way out of extinction for their entire existence. The Thren adapted. Of course they did. They always did. But this time, something was wrong. Every adjustment they made had already been anticipated, not in detail, but in principle. Humanity didn't know what the Thren would do. They just knew the Thren would try something. So they prepared for everything. A Thren synaptic chorus reached a horrifying conclusion. This species has fought us before. Panic, something the Thren had no word for, rippled through their collective. They dug deeper. They found fragments, time echoes, probability scars, evidence of a universe that had once gone another way. And at the center of it all, one human. The Thren targeted him immediately. A precision strike tore through Earth's orbital defenses, carving a path toward the command station. "Evacuate," someone shouted. Elias didn't move. "I'm not running again," he said quietly. The station shuddered as alien fire slammed into its shields. Elias opened a channel. Not to the Thren fleet, to the Thren collective. "I know you," he said calmly. "I've watched you burn my world." The response was not words. It was recognition. Hatred. Fear. "You're wondering how," Elias continued. "How a species this young learned to fight you." The station's shields flared, holding. "I'll tell you," Elias said. "We lost." He smiled, thin and tired. "And we hated it so much that we rewrote reality to get another try." The Thren surged. Every remaining war form converged on Earth, determined to erase the anomaly at its source. That was exactly what humanity wanted. Deep beneath the planet's crust, ancient machines awakened, devices built not to fight, but to anchor space-time. Elias whispered the activation code. Now, Earth vanished, not destroyed, hidden, wrapped in a localized temporal pocket that existed slightly out of sync with the rest of the universe. The Thren fleet overshot, straight into the kill zone. Humanity unleashed everything. Stars were dimmed, space bent, weapons fired that had no names because naming them would have made them less effective. The Thren fought back with terrifying ferocity, but for the first time in their long existence, they were losing. Earth disappeared, not destroyed, not hidden behind illusion, removed from the same temporal reference frame. For a fractional moment, the Thren fleet surged forward and found themselves alone, surrounded. The kill zone activated. Human weapons fired that did not seek ships, but relationships. Gravity wells collapsed, sensor causality inverted, internal Thren coordination dissolved into isolated screams of data. Error, collective coherence failing. Error, command authority fragmented. Error, we are being hunted individually. This had never happened before. The Thren did not lose wars. They lost relevance. The Thren did not feel confidence. They felt certainty. This star system had already been processed once. The matter distribution was familiar. The biology was archived. The outcome had been statistically guaranteed. That certainty fractured 7.2 seconds after first contact. A forward observer node ceased transmitting, not destroyed, not degraded, but absent. Its mass signature collapsed into a non-event, leaving behind a gravitational scar that should not exist. Query: cause of failure? Response: unknown. No energy spike detected. Correction: reclassify anomaly. The Thren shifted formation with practiced elegance, war forms flowing like schools of deep ocean predators. That was when the humans struck again. The second impact did not target a ship. It targeted space. A kinetic projectile passed through the predicted location of a Thren cruiser before the cruiser arrived there. Intersecting with a probability solution, the Thren had not yet collapsed into reality. From the Thren perspective, The ship was alive. Then history corrected itself. The vessel unraveled along fault lines that did not exist. Error. Causality inversion detected. Error. Temporal model invalid. Error. Enemy prediction exceeds acceptable bounds. This was impossible. The Thren had mastered predictive warfare before humans had invented fire. No species guessed this well. Standard extermination doctrine escalated. Null fields bloomed. Regions where physics was simplified, stripped of messy variables like uncertainty and chaos. Previous civilizations had died screaming when their technology failed inside them. Human drones entered the null field and kept moving. They were ugly things. Asymmetrical, overbuilt, no elegant harmonics, no reliance on higher-order physics. Just mass, momentum, redundancy. When one failed, 5 more took its place. Observation. Enemy systems function under degraded universal constants. Hypothesis. Deliberate design choice. Conclusion. Enemy engineers are insane. This conclusion was correct. The Thren synaptic chorus expanded, pulling in deeper layers of cognition. Ancient memories surfaced, half-forgotten fragments from civilizations that had resisted longer than expected. Patterns emerged. Not identical, but rhyming. Query. Has this species encountered us previously? Answer. Historical record indicates successful extermination. Counterpoint. Evidence contradicts certainty. Certainty, the foundation of Thren dominance, began to erode. A human transmission pierced the Thren command lattice, not encrypted, not concealed, but deliberately raw. A single voice. Old, calm, tired. We know how this ends if we don't stop you. The Thren recoiled, not emotionally, but computationally. The probability space around that statement was scarred. Time had been interfered with. Realization event. This species has experienced defeat by US and has returned. Return was not a concept the Thren valued. What was erased stayed erased. Except, apparently, humans did not agree. All Thren priorities shifted. Erase the anomaly. War forms burned maneuvering mass, tearing open space-time corridors that ignored efficiency in favor of immediacy. Entire defensive layers were abandoned to reach the human's position. This was not strategy. It was survival instinct, ancient and panicked. When the firing stopped, space was quiet. Not peaceful, empty. As the last Thren command node began to collapse, Elias did one final, terrible thing. He activated Project Janus again. Not to escape, to send a message. Not to the past, but backward along the probability chain, to the version of the universe where Earth had already died. A single packet of data. A whisper across timelines. We won. You were not wrong to try. Humanity lives. The machine burned out. Elias slumped into his chair as the last Thren vessel tore itself apart under human fire. Earth shimmered back into normal space. Alive. Scarred. Unbroken. Centuries later, human explorers would find ruins of Thren civilizations. Not destroyed. Abandoned. Warning markers etched into space-time itself. Do not provoke this species. They do not accept extinction. Children would learn about Elias Cade in school. Not as a god. Not as a tyrant. But as a man who refused to let the story end badly. And when humanity finally stepped out into the wider galaxy, they carried a simple truth with them. They were not the strongest. They were not the oldest. They were not the smartest. But they were the ones who had died once. And come back angry.